The Subcommittee on Information Technology of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform and the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations of the Committee on Veterans Affairs will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Let me start today's hearing by trying to simply state my frustration. It's the year 2015. We live in a complex, interconnected society with self-driving cars, wearable technology, and complex algorithms that can predict when a critical mechanical component is going to break. But our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who are making the transition from DoD to VA healthcare are literally told to print out hard copies of their medical records and then walk them to the VA. We have sent men to the moon and robots to Mars. I feel like we should be able to move one electronic file, no matter how big, no matter how old, from one computer system to another. I don't mean to understate the enormity of the challenge of integrating the two largest federal bureaucracies, but it is clear to me that our inability to integrate these two systems is a problem of leadership rather than technical feasibility. The story of the interoperable electronic health record starts in 1998 with the government computer-based Patient Record Initiative. Since then, I have counted 6 programs or other initiatives from 2002 to 2013 designed to increase the exchange of healthcare data between the VA and the DoD. In that time, we've had 3 presidents and 2 wars. And the members of our armed forces are still coming home to find that 2 decades was not long enough for these 2 departments to get together and develop a workable and fully interoperable electronic health record. While today's hearing could include a conversation laced with technical terminology, interoperability, mapping national data standards, graphical user interfaces, and health data domains, at its core, this is not a problem of technology. This is an issue of management. Why did these 2 departments abandon the Integrated Health Record Program? Cost effectiveness was the answer given after spending, according to the Interagency Program Office, $564 million on the integrated health record. But continual failures to make deadlines and deliver on capabilities led to these 2 departments doing what they so often have done in the past, go their separate ways. The current plan for DoD and the VA to modernize their healthcare IT infrastructure in order to achieve full interoperability lacks metrics and goals. These are not issues of data standardization. This is Management 101. In FY 2014, the Department of Veterans Affairs spent $3.2 billion on outdated legacy technology, while the Department of Defense spent $24.3 billion. Over the summer, DoD awarded a $4.3 billion contract award to upgrade DoD's DIM-SUM program, which is DoD's program to modernize its health IT systems. But what concerns me are the statements by Mr. Frank Kendall, the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, who downplayed the role of DIM-SUM in interoperability. Mr. Kendall made these 2 comments about DIM-SUM. Begin quote, "It's a big misconception out there that this software system we're buying is about interoperability, period. There is not a big interoperability problem with the VA and DoD today," end quote. This is the problem I keep coming back to. Does management understand the depth of the problem when it comes to interoperability? And let me say this right now, just to get it out of the way. The Joint Legacy Viewer, the JLV, is not real interoperability. And I hope that is not any one of y'all's answers today to any of our questions about interoperability. The ability to view patient data and the ability to access and use in real time patient data are 2 profoundly different things. Missed deadlines, cost overruns, and failures to deliver on expectations leave me with serious doubts about these 2 departments' ability to work towards this common goal. When can DoD and the VA actually implement their planned IT improvements? When can DoD and the VA modernize their systems? When can DoD and the VA achieve full interoperability? I'm looking forward to exploring these topics today. My colleagues and I recognize these are big challenges. Interoperability of health records is something the private sector is still struggling with. But if DoD and the VA get it right, they can be a model for the rest of the world. At the end of the day, when we cut through all the technical jargon, the myriad of acronyms, and the countless PowerPoints on this topic, we have 2 very simple questions that must be answered. When will our men and women in uniform be able to walk across the street the day they are discharged from service to a VA medical facility and have their health record waiting for them? And who is in charge of making this happen? It's now my pleasure to recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Information Technology, Ms. Kelly from Illinois for her opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to the American Hospital Association, only 23% of all hospitals are equipped with the technology that would allow them to find, send, receive, and use electronic health records. The ability of different healthcare providers to share and use electronic health information with one another, regardless of their location, is often referred to as interoperability. The American Hospital Association's findings make clear that achieving the full interoperability of electronic health records among different healthcare providers is a challenge the entire healthcare industry is struggling to meet. Nowhere is this challenge more prevalent, as my chairperson said, than with the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs, operators of two of the nation's largest healthcare systems. For our military personnel and veterans, the interoperability of electronic health records is crucial for ensuring they receive the best medical care. While on active duty and later on as veterans, many DoD and VA personnel tend to be highly mobile and are more likely to have health records residing at multiple medical facilities within and outside of the United States. For several years now, the VA and the DoD have been working to achieve interoperability. Both report that so far as interoperability concerns the exchange and use of electronic health records between their two systems, this goal has been achieved. However, as GAO's August report on the status of interoperability at both the VA and the DoD makes clear, both departments are still years away from achieving full interoperability so that the electronic health records can be exchanged and used not just between their two systems, but with any private medical provider in the country. GAO recommended that VA and DoD promptly develop outcome-oriented metrics and goals for defining and measuring their progress on achieving full interoperability. As GAO noted in its report, and I quote, "Using an effective outcome-based metric approach could provide DoD and VA a more accurate, ongoing picture of their progress toward achieving interoperability and the value and benefits generated." I look forward to hearing in more detail from today's witnesses on their plans for ensuring that the VA and DoD have in place a fully modernized, interoperable electronic health record system. Today's hearing also raises valid cybersecurity concerns with respect to what each department is doing to ensure that medical records stored on their networks are adequately protected from hackers. As we've learned from this year's cyber attacks against leading health insurers like Anthem and Premera Blue Cross, hackers are now targeting medical records in an effort to obtain highly sensitive information about individuals. As the operators of two of the nation's largest healthcare systems, it is critical that DoD and the VA invest in and deploy the most advanced cybersecurity tools to safeguard the sensitive medical information that is stored on their networks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the hearing, and I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. And now welcome and recognize the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations of the Committee on Veterans Affairs, Mr. Kaufman from Colorado, who's been showing leadership on supporting our veterans for many years. Welcome you for your opening statement, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd. I would like to welcome everyone to today's joint hearing to address ongoing issues with the electronic health records, or EHRs, of the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs. VA and DoD have been attempting to harmonize their EHRs for decades, leading to an erratic history where billions of dollars have been expended to reach that goal. Initially, they sought to make their systems interoperable, the plan being that they could keep their separate systems, but make them able to seamlessly transmit critical data. Later, the agencies abandoned that idea and decided that it would be better to create a new integrated system that would be shared by both agencies. In February 2014, in a February 2014 report, GAO found that the VA and DoD Interagency Program Office, charged with overseeing these efforts, estimated the cost of this integrated system would be $29 billion from FY 2013 through FY 2029. Notably, this figure does not include the pre-2013 attempts by the agency to join their health records dating back to at least 1998. Yet again, the decision was made to switch course, this time abandoning the efforts to create an integrated system after spending at least $564 million on it and resuming pursuit of separate systems that would ideally achieve full interoperability. There have been numerous subcommittee investigations, hearings, and GAO reports highlighting the extreme dysfunction occurring in this process. The National Defense Authorization Acts for fiscal year 2008 and 2014 were explicit in their requirements for VA and DoD to jointly develop fully interoperable EHR systems, as well as to ensure that all healthcare data contained in both agencies' systems complied with national standards and were computable in real time. Both agencies have failed to meet this legal requirement by missing the October 1st, 2014 deadline to do so, and GAO has found that full interoperability will not occur before 2018. Additionally, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services developed criteria to incentivize meaningful use of certified EHRs in order to help promote health data interoperability. In the private sector, the path towards compliance and certification with those criteria is generally done using commercial off-the-shelf software. Use of successfully deployed off-the-shelf software lowers risk of project failure, reduces time to get to the desired capability, and generally speaking, costs less at implementation and sustainment, none of which appear to matter to VA. Instead, VA opted to create a proprietary system which many of its healthcare facilities across the country have further customized, leading to 130 different electronic healthcare systems. Unfortunately, this sort of disarray and failure to produce positive results has become the hallmark of VA's Office of Information and Technology. There has been a substantial personnel change in that office, which is encouraging. But there is a tremendous amount of damage that must be undone before these agencies' EHRs can meaningfully interact. The National Defense Authorization Act, I look forward to hearing from the witnesses today about the rationale for the decisions that have been made, as well as the plans to correct decades of information security weaknesses within both departments. With that, I yield back to Chairman Hurd.
Thank you, Chairman Kaufman. I now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, Ms. Custer, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd, Chairman Kaufman, and Ranking Member Kelly for holding this hearing on issues with DoD and VA electronic health records. Both agencies have been working for almost 20 years to achieve true interoperability for their health records, and one of my very first hearings at the VA committee was on this topic. The goal of real interoperability and the seamless sharing of health information has seemed in reach, but unfortunately never quite achieved. In an August 2015 GAO report, GAO noted that both agencies had failed the October 2014 deadline imposed by the 2014 National Defense Authorization Act, as referenced by my chair, to certify that all healthcare data complies with national data standards and is computable in real time. DoD and VA now report that they may be, quote, weeks away from meeting this deadline a full year later, but it is still unclear whether VA and DoD will achieve interoperability between their electronic health records by the end of 2016. This raises what I believe to be the heart of this decade-long effort and why the achievement of this goal always seems to be just out of reach. What, in practical terms, does interoperability mean to DoD, VA, and private providers? GAO refers to this as, quote, the criticality of these departments needing to define what they aim to accomplish through these efforts and identify meaningful outcome-oriented goals and metrics that indicate not only the extent to which progress is being made toward achieving full interoperability, but also the measures to which they will be held accountable. If we are not clear as to what we all mean by interoperability and what we're hoping to achieve in the case of an individual veteran or service member and the health care they receive, then we will never achieve what we mean to, and interoperability will only be in the eye of the beholder. This search for real interoperability goes beyond DoD and VA and raises questions as to our expectations regarding how healthcare data flows between agencies and now with the VA Choice Guard between those agencies and private healthcare providers. In addition, we must always ensure to the fullest extent practicable that this healthcare data is secure and safe. Until VA is able to demonstrate that its providers are able to readily access the relevant information from DoD records to make the most informed decisions on treatment options, neither agency can declare mission accomplished. As DoD pursues an overhaul of its EHR through the latest Partnership for Defense Health, and VA continues with its incremental plan to modernize the VISTA EHR under the new VISTA Evolution Program, I remain concerned that interoperability will no longer be a DoD and VA focus. I'm concerned that these separate efforts, at the end of the day, might not fully match the capabilities we envision, while coming with a higher price tag for the American taxpayer. The recent VA independent assessment found that VISTA is in danger of becoming obsolete and that VA lacks standard clinical documentation, making it difficult to exchange EHR information among all VA medical centers. We need to take a realistic look at whether the VISTA Evolution Program is the best means for VA to modernize its EHR system and achieve all the benefits and capabilities of interoperability with DoD and private providers. As more service members leave the military and as more veterans and service members receive their health care from a combination of VA, DoD, and private providers, it is vitally important that DoD and VA work to achieve interoperability not only between the two agencies, but with other health care providers treating veterans. And with that, I yield back, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for scheduling this hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Custer. We'll hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any members who would like to submit a written statement. And I want to thank the staffs of all the committees for helping us be prepared for such an important hearing that we have going on today. I'd like to also note the presence of our fellow colleague from the full Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, Mr. Heiss, and also Seth Moulton, Mr. Seth Moulton. Without objection, Mr. Heiss and Mr. Moulton are welcome to fully participate in today's hearing. We will now recognize our witnesses. I'm pleased to welcome Ms. Laverne Council, Assistant Secretary for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Thank you for being here, Ms. Council. Mr. Brian Burns, Deputy Director of Warfighter Systems Integration at the Office of Information Dominance at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Christopher Miller, Program Executive Officer of Defense Healthcare Management Systems at the U.S. Department of Defense. Mr. David DeVries, Principal Deputy Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Department of Defense. And Ms. Valerie Melvin, Director of Information Management and Technology Resources Issues at the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Welcome to you all, and thank you for being here. Pursuant to Oversight and Government Reform Committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before you testify. Please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please be seated. And let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. In order to allow time for discussion, we would appreciate it if you would limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. Your entire written statement will be part of the record. Assistant Secretary Counsel, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Chairman Hurd and Kaufman, ranking members Kelly and Custer, and members of the House Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee and Information Technology and the House Veteran Affairs Subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss interoperability, electronic health records, cybersecurity, and the state of the Office of Information and Technology, or OINT, at the Department of Veteran Affairs. I'm accompanied today by OINT's lead for the Interagency Program Office, Deputy Director Brian Burns. Over the last 3.5 months, I've had the privilege to be a part of VA, where we have the greatest mission in government to care for the nation's veterans. VA's Office of Information and Technology is at a critical inflection point. Persistent internal challenges exist in delivering IT services, and external pressures are compelling OINT to change and adapt. OINT supports each of VA's diverse lines of business, including the largest integrated healthcare system in the United States, a benefits processing organization equivalent to a medium-sized insurance company, one of the largest integrated memorial and cemetery organizations in the country, a court system, and many other components. I believe we can and must do better to deliver excellent health care and benefits to our veterans through world-class technology. And I'm delighted to discuss our new OINT strategy with you today. Our vision is to become a world-class organization that provides a seamless, unified veteran experience through the delivery of state-of-the-art technology. Our guiding principles are transparency, accountability, innovation, and teamwork. We will measure success, ensure accountability, invest in the capabilities of the OINT employees, and collaborate across VA to build trust. One of our key organizational changes is the establishment of an Enterprise Program Management Office, or EPMO. The EPMO will ensure visibility and governance of all programs and projects. As we establish the EPMO, we will integrate our 4 largest programs first: Vista Evolution, Health Data Interoperability, the Veterans Benefit Management System, or VBMS, and Medical Appointment Scheduling System, or MAS. For Vista Evolution, I have tasked the program leads, David Waltman from VHA and Alan Constantian from OINT, to deliver a business case that explains measurable outcomes for the program. After reviewing the business case, Undersecretary for Health, Dr. David Shulkin, and I will determine the next steps. The development of a business case will be the standard from all programs from their inception. Chairman Hurd, I agree. Interoperability isn't just technology. It is clear to me that we need to establish a strong technical foundation through data visibility, accessibility, and interoperability. This is a precursor to the work happening in the IPO, as well as improving the veteran experience. As you know, VA and DoD systems already share millions of health records. Having a veteran's complete health history from DoD and VA, as well as community providers, is critical to providing seamless, high-quality access to care and benefits. We will continue to work closely with the IPO and the Office of the National Coordinator to ensure national standard code. I think that VA and DoD together should be leaders in this area. When you think of data, you must also consider cybersecurity. As part of our overall strategy, our first area of focus is cybersecurity. We delivered an actionable, far-reaching cybersecurity strategy and implementation plan to Congress on September 28th of this year. OINT is committed to protecting all veterans' information and VA data and limiting access only to those with proper authority. The strategy establishes an ambitious yet carefully crafted approach to cybersecurity and privacy protections. Our strategy includes taking immediate steps to address the material weakness and includes many efforts already underway and scheduled to complete within the next quarter. Chairman and ranking members, thank you again for the opportunity to discuss our new VA IT strategy with you. Throughout this transformation, our #1 priority is always the veteran, by ensuring a safe and secure environment for their information, as well as an overall improved experience with VA. I'm committed to seeing this strategy through and leaving behind a transformed OINT when my term is over. I'm happy to take your questions at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Council, thank you for being here. I know you're pretty fresh to the job. You're stepping into a big role, and we're looking forward to working with you on this topic. Mr. Miller, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Hurd, Ranking Member Kelly, Chairman Kaufman, and Ranking Member Kuster, distinguished members of the committees, thank you for the opportunity to address you today on the state of information technology within the Department of Defense and our efforts to achieve interoperability of the Department of Veterans Affairs. I am honored to represent DoD as the Secretary's Program Executive Officer responsible for the Department's efforts to improve interoperability and modernize our electronic health record. Our service member, veterans, retirees, and their families deserve nothing less than the best possible health care and services that DoD and VA can provide. DoD is committed to ensuring service members and their families are ready to support operational mission requirements and ensuring continuity of care as members transition to veteran status. Our DoD healthcare providers have requested and need a modern system that can support increasing demands, including data sharing. To this end, DoD is committed to 2 equally important objectives: improving data interoperability with both VA and our private sector healthcare partners, and successfully transitioning to a state-of-the-market electronic health record that is interoperable with VA and the commercial healthcare systems used by TRICARE partners. Since October 2013, we have made significant progress in achieving both of these objectives. Our actions speak louder than our words and demonstrate our steadfast commitment. Today, DoD and VA share a significant amount of health data, more than any other 2 major health systems. Over the past 24 months, we have deployed 4 major interoperability software releases, conducted numerous test events, mapped more than 1 million terms to national standards, and deployed the system to over 200 DoD and VA sites. Clinicians are currently able to use their existing software applications to view records of more than 7.4 million shared patients who have received care from both departments. Both departments, healthcare providers, and VA claims adjudicators successfully access the system nearly a quarter million times per week. This data is available in real time, and the number of records viewable by both departments continues to increase. As a result of this progress, DoD will certify to Congress that it has complied with the FY14 National Defense Authorization Act requirements for interoperability with the VA by the end of this month. Most importantly, we are getting a tremendous amount of feedback from our users in both departments. On a parallel path, DoD's modernization effort is well underway. Our goal is a system for the future, which is open and flexible so that it can easily adapt to meet changing requirements. After a rigorous and comprehensive evaluation of industry proposals, DoD awarded a contract without protest in July 2015 to a team led by Leidos that includes 34 other partners. The contractor team will provide an off-the-shelf suite of products that is ONC and meets our operational requirement. The system must support the full range of military operations to include health readiness, casualty care, humanitarian assistance, disaster response, and population health. As a result of this competitive acquisition strategy, DoD's life cycle costs have been reduced from $16 billion in the previous IEHR strategy to less than $9 billion today. We are on track to begin testing this system in this coming winter to support our initial fielding in the Pacific Northwest. Through our close collaboration with the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT, we are aligning our modernization and interoperability efforts with nationally recognized data standards and industry best practices. The adoption of these will ensure that the health data of our service members and veterans is interoperable with the health systems of our private sector healthcare providers, which account for over 60% of the care provided within the military health system. We have the opportunity to save time, save money, and most importantly, save lives. Our progress the past 24 months has been a matter of getting back to acquisition basics, getting their requirement right, thinking like a taxpayer, delivering on our promises, and developing our technical workforce. We clearly understand that our mission is not complete. To remain successful, we must continue to stay focused, innovate, and hold ourselves to the highest standards of excellence. Chairman Hurd, Ranking Member Kelly, Chairman Kaufman, and Ranking Member Kuster, thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. The Department greatly appreciates the Congress's continued interest and efforts to help us deliver the health care that our nation's veterans, service members, and their dependents deserve. The Department of Defense and our colleagues at the Department of Veterans Affairs will continue to work closely together in partnership with Congress to deliver the benefits and services to those who sacrifice so willingly for our nation, whether it's on the battlefield, at home with their families, or after they have faithfully concluded their military service. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Miller, I appreciate you being here today. And now I'd like to recognize Mr. DeVries for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Hurd, ranking members, distinguished members of both subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today on the Department's cybersecurity posture and our information technology and this very important topic called electronic health record. I am a veteran. I still serve in today's nation here because I care about the service member and our families and the commitment to the quality there for the care. I am Dave DeVries, the Department of Defense Principal Deputy Chief Information Officer, simply put, the Deputy DoD CIO. I share one imperative with the CIO, Mr. Terry Halverson, to ensure the Department has access to the information, the communication networks, the decision support tools needed to successfully execute our warfighting and business support missions of today. Today I'm going to talk to you briefly about some of our efforts underway to ensure that DoD can execute its missions in the face of increasingly cyber aggressive threats, and also how we're working with the government, industry, and international partners to accomplish our secure information sharing capabilities, our cybersecurity missions, while improving our ability to share securely with both industry and the public. We are in the business of defense, but that requires us to be integrated in almost every discipline you can think of: acquisitions, health, logistics, real estate, food, distribution, industry control systems, and many, many more. Every sector out there in the public side, we represent inside DoD and need to protect that information as well as share it securely. While our top goal is to deliver capabilities more effectively and efficiently, we also need to maximize security in a budget-constrained environment worldwide. Our cyber adversaries are agile, diverse, and sophisticated, and we must be able to maneuver in the cyber world at unprecedented speeds to protect our nation's assets. The Department's FY16 IT budget request is $36.9 billion. This request included funding for a broad variety of IT, ranging from DoD warfighting command and control and communication systems, our computing services, cybersecurity, enterprise services like collaboration and electronic mail, and intelligence, support systems, and business systems. These investments support mission-critical operations that must be delivered both on the battlefield and in an office environment. We will continue to focus attention on cybersecurity and take aggressive action to counter cyber threats to our networks and weapon systems. In today's networked world, this requires collaboration and cooperation of many partners, other government agencies, industry partners, and allies, to ensure we are mitigating these threats and vulnerabilities to our national security interests. You have my written comments as we prepared them before coming in here. I welcome the questions in our upcoming discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Melvin, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Hurd and Kaufman, ranking members Kelly and Custer, and members of the subcommittees, thank you for inviting me to this important discussion of VA's and DoD's progress toward developing interoperable electronic health records. We have been reviewing the Department's initiatives for many years, and this past August, as you mentioned, issued a report on their efforts to plan for and measure progress toward achieving interoperability. My remarks this afternoon summarize our findings from that report. As you've stressed, VA and DoD have been undertaking initiatives to exchange health information and increase interoperability for almost 2 decades. Among others, these have included initiatives to share viewable health data in their existing systems and link and share computable data between their repositories. As you stated, the departments also took steps toward developing a single joint system, an approach aimed at sidestepping challenges to achieving interoperability between their separate systems. However, while increased data sharing has occurred in various ways, the departments did not follow through with developing a single system, and persistent management challenges over the years have hindered progress and elevated the uncertainty about when and how fully interoperable capabilities will be achieved. With this uncertainty, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2014 established the two deadlines for VA and DoD to first ensure that all their health data complied with national standards and were computable in real time by October 1st, 2014, and second, to deploy modernized, fully interoperable electronic health records by December 2016. In response, the departments mapped selected health data in their existing systems to national standards and began planning and working toward their implementation of separate modernized systems. However, a significant concern is that the departments have not identified outcome-oriented goals and metrics to clearly define what they aim to achieve from their interoperability efforts and the results and benefits anticipated. Such metrics can help in assessing the progress of the department's efforts, identifying areas that need attention, and ensuring accountability for end results, such as improved quality of care for veterans and service members. Further, the department's most recent decision to pursue separate interoperable systems rather than a single joint system adds to our concern. Taking separate paths to modernize their systems increases the risk that there will not be the effective collaboration and coordination needed to establish and convey a joint position on what fully interoperable capabilities will look like and how and when they will be achieved. Over the long history of the department's efforts, reaching such a state of clarity has been elusive and is further evidence of the need for outcome-oriented goals and metrics to help gauge and encourage progress on this latest effort. DoD and VA agreed with our recommendation that they develop such measures, and we look forward to following their actions to do so. Nevertheless, the department's longstanding attempts to achieve interoperable electronic health records is an example of the larger problem with ineffective management of IT projects across the federal government, as we have highlighted in our 2015 high-risk update. The history of these departments' efforts also highlights the importance of continued congressional oversight, as you are providing by holding this hearing today. VA and DoD must now do their part to more efficiently and effectively bring this challenging endeavor to a successful outcome. Recommendations that we and others have made, along with the important IT acquisition reform provisions outlined in FATARA, should give the departments a more clear basis for demonstrating further success. This concludes my oral statement, and I would be pleased to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Melvin. I'll begin with questions. Ms. Counsel, as required by the NDAA of 2014, all VISTA data was to be in a compliant format established by the Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, or the ONC, but VA stated it would not certify until later in 2015. Has VA certified its compliance to the standard?
Want to take that, Brian?
Mr. Burns?
Yes, I'll have Mr. Brian respond, because I want to make sure we're precise on this answer.
Okay.
At this point, we have not certified to the 2014 requirement, the October 1st, 2014 requirement. The approach we took is we identified 25 domains. From those 25 domains, we prioritized those. The first 7 we looked at were the most frequently used, the most high volume, and what we consider the most relevant terms. Those we did do data mapping to, and then we continued to map from there, and we're still continuing to do that process. As we go forward, we also do updates to each one of those respective domains to make sure that any additional terms that come in are also mapped. Those then are used in data maps that go into the capability of sharing the information with JLV. So at this point, we have data maps for most of the sets. We have partial mapping for most of the sets at this point.
Okay. Mr. Miller, nearly 6 years after a 2010 GAO report discussed the need for VA and DoD to address unstructured data, what has the IPO done to accomplish the interoperability of unstructured data, or the development of a national standard?
Sir, I would offer a couple of things, sir. We do have a dedicated IPO, Dr. Lauren Thompson. She reported aboard in May. For some time, I was wearing two hats, but I'm no longer wearing two hats. I think that's reflective of our commitment to the IPO and the work that they do. With regards to national standards, you heard in my opening comments, our strategy has been to partner with the Office of National Coordinator for Health IT in identifying those areas and what standards we need to have, and to leverage things like ONC certification, and then to bring those forward between the two departments, and let's determine jointly what those standards needs to be, and then promulgate those back out to both departments. I think you will see on both the DoD and the VA, those standards are incorporated. If you were to go look inside the DoD's acquisition program, you would see where those were required as part of our modernization. They were part of our technical package. Those things are currently flowing back to both departments. The IPO is basically responsible for working between the two departments, providing technical leadership to make sure that those standards apply, and then bringing things back to the Office of National Coordinator where we need refined standards and improvements in standard. Just recently, the IPO took a very strong leadership role in looking at things like the CCDA document, which is a consolidated document that provides a transition of care within the commercial side that DoD and VA are both using as part of our exchange with our commercial providers. And so those are the kinds of activities where the IPO is taking strong technical leadership and helping us understand what the appropriate national standards are. I think as everybody's highlighted today, the national standards piece is much bigger than just DoD and VA, and we need to have a strong collaboration with the leadership of HHS.
Ms. Melvin, in February 2014, GAO reported that VA and DoD failed to correctly implement the IPO, and further noted the diminished role the IPO plays between VA and DoD. Considering this finding, what purpose does the IPO serve in its current state, and similarly, is there a need for the IPO at all?
Well, I'd start by saying that the IPO was established by the National Defense Authorization Act for 2008, so it has a specific function in statute to be the single point of accountability for VA and DoD achieving the electronic health record. Several of our reports, in fact, have noted that the position of the office has not been specific to or as connected to the overall function for which it was assigned. We have seen it having a limited role in the department's current efforts over time. It's been what I would describe as more of an evolving role, and it's one that it is reasonable that one would question its current responsibilities and whether it should exist. Having said that, the IPO is currently responsible for developing the national standards, or at least identifying the national standards that that VA and DoD are to adhere to. So they do have an important function. I think the important thing about it is that it must be clear what the role of that office is going to be. If it's not going to be at the level of a role of authority, a single accountability office for authority, then it is important for the agencies and for Congress to determine what their role should be.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Miller, why is it important that your department first ensure that all healthcare data comply with national standards?
Because, ma'am, as we've highlighted today, our care is provided in a number of different settings. And in case of DoD, more than 60% of our care is provided out on the market through our TRICARE contracts. And the way that we get at the ability to really share and use information is by adopting these national standards. And I think it's important that we all recognize that both DoD and VA were well ahead of where the larger national effort was that started really in the HITECH Act in 2008, 2009. And so part of our struggle has been taking a lot of legacy data that we were leaders in and then working towards and getting on board with these national standards that have fairly rapidly evolved over the past few years as part of our EHR adoption. But simply put, ma'am, DoD generates veterans. Those veterans need to have seamless care no matter where they go, and the way that we make sure that there's a common meaning and a common understanding of that information is by all of us agreeing at the national level to what those standards are. The challenge is there's a lot of them. And the other challenge is we all have to agree at a little bit lower level than just adopting a top-level standard. There have to be some lower-level agreement about what we mean with certain standards. And so, again, that reinforces where the IPO fits, because the IPO provides a critical linkage between our two departments and the Office of the National Coordinator, because we provide a lot of feedback. We do believe we can be on the leading edge in many of these efforts, and it's that IPO function that really provides a strong leadership role to make sure that we implement the national standards correctly, ma'am.
Well, Mr. Miller and Ms. Counsel, can you tell me when your respective departments will be able to certify that the data complies with national standards? When's your goal? What are you looking at?
So, ma'am, I will say from DoD, I just reviewed our letter for certification. I do want to highlight that one of the reasons why DoD is a little bit late here is that the NDAA, which I have a copy of, if you really want to look at it, it refers only to DoD's ALTA data. ALTA data is our outpatient data. And the reason why I want to take a second and explain this is when we met with our functionals, and I'm here to tell you, I don't measure success for DoD. I measure success by what our users say. And so when we started down this journey to do this data mapping and to understand what they wanted to be able to access in an integrated view as the NDAA required, they came back and said, it's much more than your outpatient data. It's your inpatient data. It's your data from the private sector. It's the data from in-theater and our theater systems. And so because of that, DoD took the last year to integrate much more than what the NDAA required, because I felt that was the right thing to do. And so I will defend, because it is what our functional users really asked for. Making that data available, we also had to work through a series of data maps. And over the last year, we went through 4 iterative builds. Those builds were reviewed by subject matter experts in the DoD as well as the IPO before we put them in production. And so those things took a little time. I am here to say that some of this stuff is incredibly complicated. We're dealing with a large number of terms, and it was important that we did this right. The last thing I want to do as an acquisition person is put a bad tool in my users' hands, because they will not like it. They will get turned off from it. And we've been very careful about how we've deployed the things and how we have increased access. And I'm here to tell you today, our results are pretty staggering when you look at the demands and the feedback we're getting for the use of this information. It is not about JOV. What really JOV provides is a view into the data that's flowing between the two departments. And in reality, what will happen is the VA, any of their systems will use that data, whether it's EHMP, their VISTA follow-ons, and they will use it however it best makes sense within their healthcare setting. The same in DoD. We are working right now to make sure that data coming back from VA is provided to our new system as part of our integration and testing over the next year. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Counsel.
Yes, as far as our data is concerned and spending some time with the team, certainly we receive the data from DoD and then we have to map it to the standards to our system. The team says that we should be well on time to certify in 2016. But the VA issue around data is much broader than that. Our veteran has more than just health data that we're concerned about. It's general active duty and other sets of data that we'll be bringing together. One of the key factors of our new strategy is starting and establishing a strong data management capability to give us a holistic look at the veteran and be able to interchange and engage with that veteran in a very different way than we do today. So for the VA, our look is not just the health. We will certify that in 2016, but broader so that we can change the veteran's experience by having a holistic look at their information that's important and germane to the benefits, the health care, as well as the end care they receive.
So can you two currently exchange patient health data between one another?
We currently do today exchange health information between each other.
You can do that, and do all users have access to interoperable electronic health record systems?
Go ahead.
We, at this point, we have, depending on the system, we have users that use the existing system, CPRS. We also, through the viewers, we are adding users on a regular basis. This time last year, we had, with JLV, we had 600 users. We now have up to 19 users every single week in doing that. That's just one tool. As said, there's other tools that there are access to in our web-based solutions as we move forward, and even our follow-on modernization. So we continue to add users on a regular basis. This year also we added VBA, Veterans Benefits Administration users, which was a significant help in getting them to be able to look at the records in addition just from the health standpoint.
Thank you. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Mr. Farenthold, Texas. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to follow up on that a little bit, Mr. Burns, if you will. You say you've added 19,000 users in a viewer. I mean, that really isn't interoperability where everybody can access the data that needs to access the data, and doctors can and nurses can input the data. I mean, that's just, okay, I'm able to look at it, right?
With JLV, it is a viewer, so you're able to look at the data. The one thing that we did add through that is that we have where data is mapped. We can then demonstrate and show the mapping of the data in addition to the original data. So
that isn't where I wanted to go, but I wanted to follow up on that question. Ms. Counsel, the Secretary of the VA, Mr. McDonald, was recently in South Texas and said, you know, one of the reasons there was such a slow pay system is some of the legacy systems are still operating in the COBOL programming language. I mean, 1960s technology. You know, it just seems like there's not a focus there. You spoke a little bit about you know, making the business case for what products in IT that you work on. You know, can you tell me a little bit what the business case is? To me, the number one focus should not be the business case, but should be providing quality service to veterans. I mean, I could make a business case for making veterans wait months for service so we don't have to make more doctors. I mean, what constitutes business case?
It really gets to the point that was raised earlier. How do we measure success? How do we know we're actually accomplishing what we said we would accomplish? And how do we know we're spending our time and monies on the right thing to enable help for the veteran? So that's what we mean by business case.
All right, so let's look at what's happening now. There was just a report out today that in San Antonio, just north of the district I represent, that we have the highest wait times since May. We're up to 12,000 veterans waiting over 30 days to get care. That's the worst in the entire VA. I mean, I thought we were trying to address these wait times. Shouldn't that be, the wait times be one of the top priorities of getting veterans the care that they need in a timely fashion?
It certainly should, sir. And at the end of the day, that's what the MASS project is set schedule, so we can really handle the capacity that we have. It is our responsibility to ensure that we change the veterans' experience at VA. And my intent as leading the IT organization is to modernize this organization and get us to make the decisions that we need to make to focus on the right things.
We've looked at, we started talking about this in Congress in 2008, 2009. You look at 2008, 2009, Uber didn't exist. They've come up with a complete data infrastructure of the world's largest taxi service without a single driver. They can be wherever in most cities, can pick you up in a matter of minutes. Square Technologies has come online where you can plug something into your iPad and do credit card. Pinterest wasn't in existence in 2007. I mean, the technology can be done in a timely fashion. Is there a culture problem? What is the problem within the VA that makes IT such a struggle?
Well, I think part of the issue is many of the examples you gave were independents, and they're not trying to enable an enterprise. They're not trying to enable HR and finance and all the other things that come with it. But I also say part of it has been, frankly, making some hard decisions and holding people accountable to achieve things we said we will do. And making sure we have focus. We cannot do everything. We got to do the right things. So when we start a program, we have to complete a program. We need to be relentless in our execution, and we have to focus. And the bottom line is the team has not done that. We will do that, and that's part of our current new strategy.
And one of the things Mr. Miller said, he doesn't want to deploy a bad app to turn people off. But part of any IT system, and I remember this back in the 80s and 90s when I was doing a computer consultant. You had to get buy-in from your folks that this was going to make their jobs easier and that it was going to be good for them. How can it sounds like that's one of the struggles you're talking about. I mean, this is the 21st century. It's in almost every case, especially in the private sector, you see the implementation of IT really greatly improve efficiency. Now, some people may argue they have to work harder with fewer people with it, but the level of customer service that people have come to expect as a result of the technology revolution is higher. How can the folks within the VA not get that?
You are 100% correct. At the end of the day, our opportunity is to bring the system forward and do it in a way that's going to change the environment for the veteran. And up to this point, we have not had core portfolios for our various business groups. We will be putting in, as part of this strategy, new account managers that actually work within the business with customer relationship people within the business to create portfolio and a ranked stack against the things that need to get done to change this perspective. And if you don't have the business perspective working in conjunction with IT, you don't end up with that kind of system that's going to make a difference. And so that's where we're focusing.
Well, I see my time has expired. I would like to take 1 second and urge you to maybe take some lessons from the private sector and develop an entrepreneurial spirit within the VA and the IT department to get her done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Custer, New Hampshire.
Thank you very much. My comments and question are focused on the VA. Ms. Counsel and Mr. Burns, Ms. Counsel just talked about hard decisions and focus. Some have said, and in fact the recent independent assessment found, that the VISTA program was in danger of becoming obsolete. And my question is that, are we at the point where we just can't keep trying to rejigger the technology, but that we would have better outcomes? And you're focused on the different business activities, and one that I'm very focused is the scheduling to bring down the wait times. You've got the health data record, the health records. We've now got outside providers. Could you just give me, if you have an opinion on this since you've arrived, or Mr. Burns, if you've been around longer, do you feel that maybe we're at the point where we should be considering more an approach from the bottom up rather than trying to change what we're currently working with?
One of the things, and you know, I come from the private industry. I've spent 30 years in private industry, so this is my first foray into any kind of government appointment. And what I look for, what I really want to understand with any large business investment or any system investment, like a Vista Evolution, is what do we expect to be the outcome? What are we really trying to play for, and what do we think that's going to do for us, not just now, but also in the future? So to answer your question, that is the reason why Dr. Shulkin and I, requested the business case. We wanted to have a fact-based conversation about what the right next steps would be with VISTA. We didn't want to take it from the cuff. We didn't want to take it from pulling various data. We really wanted to go into understanding where we are today, where we're hoping to go, and will that take us where we need to go for the veteran in the future. He and I will be looking at that case and spending a concerted amount of time, timing just didn't work out, but it's this week, to really decide on those core next steps. It's the right thing to do. It's the coherent thing to do, but we want to do it based on having real facts behind us and making sure that we're making the right decision for the veteran in long term. At the end of the day, VISTA is a clinical focused system. It is focused on the patient, and it has enabled that capability to really drive many breakthroughs. What we've got to figure out is what opportunities do we have to continue with it as a backbone, and should we be moving with different levels of technology that we haven't used before, and thinking about it differently architecturally, and thinking about it differently how the veteran should engage with it and how it should engage with the clinician. We're leveraging the program managers, Mr. Waltman and Mr. Constantian's business report with Dr. Shulkin and myself, and we will make a decision.
Great. Well, I hope you'll keep us apprised, but I think we'll be well served by that analysis. Sometimes we talk about this interoperability, and I wonder whether we are agreeing on what it is that we're trying to describe. It seems to me that there are three different levels: the foundational is just the very basic, that, you know, where you're looking at the page on the screen, and it doesn't allow for the interpretation of the data or the sharing of the data. Structural, the intermediate level, defining the structure or format of the exchange, and then semantic, the highest level, the ability to exchange and use the exchange information. And I know going forward, and certainly the practitioners that I've spoken to, the providers in the VA, want to be able to use the data for research, for trends, we have a terrible opioid and addiction problem going on. Can we look at the population, learn from the best practices? Could you just comment on where you feel the VA is right now, what level we're at, and where we might expect to be a year from now?
Sure. Actually, Brian and I have been talking about this a lot, so I'm going to give him an opportunity to answer your question.
Thank you.
In the terms that you laid out, first of all, the first level is foundational, or another way of saying it is technical. We do technical exchange day to day, and that's the fundamental basic level. So we're pretty good there.
And that's happening right now throughout the VA?
That's happening throughout the VA. And it's been happening actually for over a decade of transferring data. Okay. And that's really thinking of transmission of data, showing the data as is, or to some degree with the standards. The next level, the intermediate level, gets more into how do you begin to use the data. And that's where we're focused, at least from the IPO perspective, of what are the use cases? How do we actually want to use that data, and what is pertinent? What are the key components? What are the key elements? And then how much of that needs to be beyond the technical level? So we're focusing on that and bringing in the subject matter experts from DoD and VA to have those conversations. That's a continuing, evolving process. The highest level, as you mentioned, semantic, or another way of saying it is process. That's really looking at the workflows, and that's going across the organizations. That's a much more future issue, and candidly, that's an issue that even ONC is working with a strategic plan of how do we get from the current just sharing data at the rudimentary levels moving forward. So to answer your question, I think from a technical standpoint or foundational standpoint, we're really close, we're there. If we get into the intermediate level, we have pieces of it that we actually can do today, and ultimately we're trying to go with the modernization beyond just the NDAA, is really have the modernized system where we get the workflows and the semantics down, that it's machine to machine, and you can do the trend analysis, and you can do the look at the patient data far better to make decisions real quick, much quicker, and actually see even more patients as we go. And that's fundamentally, too, with the Vista Evolution solution, where we are really transforming to look at patient-centric and team-centric and data-centric approaches to the information far beyond what we've traditionally done in our existing systems.
Well, thank you very much, and I apologize for going over. Thank you.
Mr. Lamborn, Colorado, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both the chairmen for having this meeting today. This is a huge, monumental, massive project. And I have to ask I want to back up a step, a preliminary question. So for someone from the VA and someone from DoD, as you work on this interoperability, and I agree with the GAO conclusion, there has to be goals and metrics as you do this. But let me back up and ask about cybersecurity. Can you assure us that as you build this forward, that hackers can't come in like they did at OPM and access medical records of our veterans or of our active duty military?
What I will tell you is that everything that we're doing around our new cyber strategy is what we also currently do with our defense in depth, is to protect that data at all costs. Our data is not only in the system, but our data is also on paper. And so ensuring that we're educating the workforce, that we're being diligent about our information and where we leave it, how we mail it, what we do with it, are all a part of what OINT has to do with ensuring that we keep the veterans safe. When you look at where we went with our cybersecurity strategy, it's the most holistic strategy that we have ever had in our history. It is focused on 8 key domains, including medical cyber. And the whole focus is no one on the team ever wants to happen to a veteran what happened to them through OPM. So that is our focus, that's our key, and that's our mission.
Thank you. Mr. Miller or DeFries?
And I would just like to add on to that. The cybersecurity is one very important aspect of it. But just as we talked about the standards for the health record, that's based on the ONC model. All of us in the government are conforming to the same security standards set up by NIST that we all participate in. It's important that we have those common standards and that we all conform to them and rigorously enforce the adoption of those. So that's the biggest push. VA has been doing the same thing. DoD is doing it. We have been pushing now the cybersecurity aspect and the need to conform to the standards that have been put out and then measure it by leadership. Just recently, DoD has put out a cybersecurity. We've published that. We have now come up with a common standard scorecard. With that whole aspect is, no matter what the mission area is, and medical is just one of those mission areas for us, it must be about protecting the identity of the person, protecting the data where it's in storage, but also in transport, and then how it's being consumed.
Okay, well, thank you both. Ms. Counsel or Mr. Burns, VA interoperability just among yourselves is a concern of mine. Leaving aside DoD, there are 1,700 points of healthcare providers among the VA nationwide. What is the interoperability just among VA healthcare providers?
That is the core part of why we're putting a data management process in place. Today, when you look at the OINT organization, we actually have the best opportunity to bring the information together for the on the veteran's behalf. So you have the health side, and of course we have to be able to work with our community providers. But again, remember there's a whole benefit level side and many veterans that don't use the health side that also creates a level of data and information for that veteran and to their end. So our issue and our opportunity is really to bring together the entirety of that set of information and start to leverage it on behalf of the veteran and sharing with the veteran what their opportunities are, where the benefit opportunities are, as well as what they should be thinking of in relationship to their health. That is core to this strategy. We've got to do it, and today, health data sort of sits separately from the benefits data, and that's not appropriate for the veteran.
So if someone moves from Portland, Maine to San Diego, their records, a veteran, their records go with them electronically today?
They do not go with them electronically today. That is what we're working on.
Okay, because obviously that has to happen before you can interact with the DoD, and vice versa.
Well, interacting with the DoD, information is from active duty to becoming a veteran in active duty. The issue with topography and moving from one location to another is making sure that another location can take that information and use it. So unless the veteran ports that information or we send that information on their behalf, it won't be there. We can send the information, but the key is we want to be in a situation where the information is everywhere the veteran is, regardless of their location, and that's what we're working toward.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Liu, California, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Over 45 years ago, the United States of America sent a human being to the moon and brought that person back. The DoD and VA can certainly have interoperable health records. The fact that you haven't been able to do it for nearly 2 decades is not excusable. It is a failure of prior leadership at the VA and the DoD. And I believe what compounds this is a decision made in 2013 for both agencies to now pursue separate modernizations. I think that's a ridiculous decision. And the GAO, in fact, has noted that the 2013 decision to pursue separate modernization rather than a single joint system indicates that achieving interoperability will be an ongoing concern for years to come. So what I want to know is, why can't you all just pick one system, whether it's a DoD system or the VA system, and implement it? Why do you have to pursue 2 separate modernizations? I don't understand that.
So my first reaction is I think it's important we understand that the 2 departments have different healthcare missions. I think, when
so you're not customer focused, you're not focused on taking care of the active duty person?
No, but I'm worried about making sure it works on a submarine at beyond periscope depth. I'm worried about it working in Afghanistan on SATCOM. I'm worried about it taking care of children I think it's important that we do share a common veterans population, but I think we also need to recognize that the two departments do have different organizational missions when it comes to healthcare delivery.
And so are your systems lesser systems? Are they more basic because they've got to work on a submarine? Or are they not as robust? Or
I wouldn't say they're more basic. I think that we have different operating environments. And so when you're taking care of veterans in the United States CONUS and you have the ability to do certain things, that environment does not exist in theater for our people that are taking care of our soldiers that go in, our sailors, airmen, marine that go in harm's way. So I think we have to recognize our different operating environment. Additionally, there are different.
So if your system can work on a submarine, let me ask the VA, why don't you just take their system? If it works on a submarine, it's going to work in your VA hospital. Why don't you just use that system?
I can't speak for what decisions were made in 2013, but I certainly can say that our clinical capabilities and what we have to do from a veteran from the time they become a veteran to the time that they leave this earth is a much holistic calling. And for us, it is about the total health and capability of that veteran, and for us managing that care of that veteran during that time. It is different transaction, I think is what Mr. Miller is getting to. The timing of that transaction, our situation, our alignment is a lifelong alignment. And so our decision base probably will not work with the level of transactional focus that they would have.
So you're saying that when the two secretaries in 2011 said you all could have a single joint system, that they were just wrong?
I have no idea what the requirements were.
Now, let me ask you, do any private sector hospitals use VISTA?
Not that I'm aware of, sir. However, inside the United States, outside the United States, yes.
Okay. And do any private sector hospitals use your DoD system that also works on submarines?
Yes, sir. It's one of the largest used in the United States today.
Okay. Question about the viewer that you all are talking about. Can you search on this viewer for terms or anything else, or is it just a viewer? The interoperable.
So I wish we could give you a demo. I think it would explain a lot here, because I think when you think about healthcare, a lot of the information that your providers or our providers are accessing is just information they're referencing, right? The decision is going to get documented in their primary care system. But when you think about this viewer that we've been working together on, oh, by the way, it's been jointly done between the two departments. You can configure your displays. You can search for VA patients. You search for DoD patients. We're continually getting
Can you search for, I don't know, blood test result or for?
So if you're talking about getting down to a lower level of search capability, that's one of the things that we're working on. Right now, we've been asked to be able to show all those different domains, and now we're taking a look at the next level, which would be lower level search capabilities within those domains.
What can you search? What can you currently search for?
When you bring up, so that's why it'd be easier to display. When you bring up the patient, it actually shows you all their information.
Right.
So the search.
And then can you search for something in that
right,
document?
that's what I'm saying. So it's not like you go doing deep business analytics through the tool. The tool basically presents an integrated record.
Is there any difference between that and someone handing you a Xerox of the file?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean.
Because you can search for things?
Right, you can search for things. You can configure only what you want to see. So if there's a module you care about that you don't want to see, depending on your role, whether you're an ED doctor or you're an outpatient doctor, you can configure that view. There's a
My
whole
time
lot
is
of
up, so let me just conclude. I believe the two separate modernizations are a mistake. I think the DoD should just take the VISTA system and make it applicable on submarines. It shouldn't be that hard. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. Mr. Walker, North Carolina, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witness panel. Appreciate your time and being here today and sharing your thoughts and the information that's so crucial to this hearing. As part of the Cloud Computing Caucus, I've got a few questions from that particular perspective in the world of cyber arena that we are entering in. And let me start with Mr. DeVries, and then maybe we'll come back to Mr. Miller. How are the VA and the Department of Defense taking advantage of these commercial cloud services to streamline the EHR, the electronic health record, interoperability, and then reduce costs? So it's a little two-part question there. First, how are we doing that, and then how do we see it or you perceive it to reduce the cost?
So I think it's important to lay out where we are today. Today, the Department of Defense health record system The medical records themselves sit in a centralized data repository that allows us to have access to it globally, down to the submarine, as Chris talked about there. We're moving to aggressively now into the commercial environment. The HIMSM contract that we talked about here in the opening statements, that's on the street. We're aggressively now looking at where we're going to put the medical records, and I'll let Mr. Miller talk more about that. But we have laid open through the federal standards as well as inside DoD to aggressively pursue, if you meet the security requirements and standards, then let's go ahead with the most economically feasible way of doing it. It may not be a cloud, but it may be a commercially provided data storage.
Okay, Mr. Miller?
So as part of our modernization strategy, I would tell everyone that we're trying to take advantage of those emerging technologies because we know it'll simplify things and allow us to accelerate our deployment. And so if I were to go back to our previous systems, we would be installing software and things inside of our hospitals. Well, today, and I think you will see this if you go to your own, any commercial healthcare provider, really, you don't provide anything to the hospital anymore. That system is basically hosted centrally somewhere, whether at a data center, as a cloud, or part of a managed service. And basically, you just have to have a network connection and a device that can support it, just like your smartphone or something else. And that's the same strategy we're pursuing.
Yeah, I'm aware of how it works, but my question is, I hear you say future tense we are pursuing.
Well,
are there action steps that we're taking?
Absolutely, sir. I mean, the proposals that we evaluated all banked on that technology being a key enabler. And so as part of our testing here in a couple of months, we'll be testing how well that works. And as part of our deployment, that's our hosting strategy that we're currently under the process of finalizing. But our hosting strategy will be centrally done so that we can take advantage of those technologies.
I appreciate the timeline there. Let me ask this question as well. If agencies that have sensitive information, such as the Health and Human Services Department, can leverage commercial cloud services, can I ask them why isn't the VA?
So,
Ms. Counsel, then I'll come back to Mr. Miller. Go ahead.
yes, fundamentally, that is where we're moving to. Part of our new strategy is a buy first and looking at the platform. Initially, when I first arrived, I met with the Inspector General to understand what their concerns were around us using the cloud. I also looked at our FISMA posture around our data. We had ranked all of our data FISMA high. In a cloud environment, that is incredibly difficult to be in a FISMA high platform and use the cloud. We that and re-looked at our policy so that we can move to the cloud. In addition, our electronic health management platform, which is the platform that's being placed on top of Vista, basically prepares us to move to the cloud. It moves the data into a new platform, so it'll be much more fungible and move us to that location. And we are currently now looking at key applications and virtualization with cloud technology.
Ms. Miller, if I have time, I'll come back. But Ms. Melvin, I do have a question for you. Making sure that I'm crystal clear on this. What is the statutory deadline for deploying modernized electronic health record software with interoperability?
The deadline that we spoke to in our report was December 31st, 2016, and that was based on what the FY 2014 National Defense Authorization Act is currently calling for.
And that's a self-imposed deadline?
That's the deadline that's called for in the Act.
All right, and you feel good that you're on track?
Well, from GAO's perspective, our review looked at that, and we found that through the plans that both VA and DoD provided to us, no, they are not on track to meet the 2016 deadline. They are in the process of implementing capabilities. They do have initial capabilities, I know, within the department.
And see, I'm going to cut you off. And that's my concern. We have a deadline, and we're working towards that, but my time has expired. I'll throw it to Mr. Miller if you want to respond to that, and then I'll yield back to the chairman.
Yes, I would just highlight that the NDA was silent about what deployment actually meant. And I think to the Armed Services Committee, they understand our plan. We met all their NDA requirements, got our funding restrictions lifted. They understand that. I think it's important that I understand the desire to go faster, but there's reality in some of these. We are talking laws of physics about how fast we can modernize this system within the Department of Defense, because it is much more than just documentation. It drives our scheduling, it drives our registration, it drives our people engagement. It is a fundamental business transformation about how we do business. It is not simply a small app that you will have on your smartphone that has to go to a lot of places. So we need to be incredibly smart here. This is not something we should rush to. And so I understand the GAO report, but I think the language as written was not clear about what deployment actually meant, sir.
Mr. O'Rourke of Texas, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have yet to hear a compelling answer to Mr. Liu's questions about why we can't unify within a single system. I understand the system has to run on submarines. I understand that within the VA, we're taking care of veterans from the point at which they transition out of active duty service until, as you said, Secretary Counsel, they leave this earth. But I think the fundamentals of the system seem to be basic enough, and given the leverage that you two departments have as the two largest departments within the federal bureaucracy, there's got to be a way that you can figure this out. Ms. Melvin, has the GAO arrived at an assessment of the conclusions that these two departments have, that they simply cannot work together? Is that conclusion shared by the GAO, or have you asked yourselves that question?
Our concern is with the departments going down separate paths. We do think that it has inherent duplication in that approach. What I would say over time is that as we've looked at both departments' initiatives, I think back in 2013, we issued a report that looked at some of the fundamental reasons or barriers, if you will, for why these departments weren't able to do that. I mean, inherently, each department has its own culture, and we understand that. What we found, though, that there was a lack of joint strategic planning on the part of the two departments to really look at what it is that they could do collectively to achieve this end state in terms of a joint system. We also saw that and reported on the fact that there was a lack of a joint architecture or an overall investment management plan for getting them there.
Let me ask you this, and I'm sorry to interrupt you,
That's
but
okay.
is part of the problem that there are no consequences? Congress mandates a requirement and an outcome back in 2008, 2009, and Mr. Miller, Secretary Counsel have given us lots of great excuses for why they can't get it done. You've suggested some of the roadblocks that were in the way, but was there a consequence? Was anybody held accountable? Could these two departments just come to the conclusion that this is just too hard to do, we don't want to do it for whatever reasons, and then they don't do it, and now we're marching down these two paths that may or may not be parallel, may or may not work together, may or may not waste billions of taxpayer dollars, and there's no consequence. I've reached the conclusion that the only person who can referee this dispute between these two departments is the President, and it must become a priority of his, and he must, unless there's, I'm all ears on a compelling reason why we can't do this, unless he says to the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the VA, you have to find a way to get to a unified system that works for every active duty service member, their family members, dependents, and the veterans. It is certainly possible for all the reasons that everyone has given. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you think it is possible, or do you agree with Mr. Miller and Secretary Counsel that this is impossible?
I won't say that it's impossible. I think our concern is that over the years, the history of looking at this, we've had a lot of concerns about the starts and stops with this initiative. There have been mandates. The 2008 National Defense Authorization Act, for example, directed them to have fully interoperable capabilities. It has been a history of the two departments going down particular paths that they wanted to pursue for this, changing at certain points, and there has not, in our view, been the accountability for them doing it. They have changed gears along the way, as the most clear being moving from two systems to a joint system, and that back to two systems again. So it is a matter of the leadership taking the stand and saying we're going to make this happen and working to do that. We have not seen the dedication on the part of the two departments to take a stand on that and actually make it stick.
Yeah, I would just say to my colleagues that if we are satisfied by the excuses given today, then we share in the culpability for the consequences that I think we're going to be hearing about at a hearing in 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years about why these systems can't work together, why we've spent billions of dollars, and why we haven't been able to get the job done. I think we have to insist on consequences and accountability and performance, and we have not done that effectively to date. And so I look forward to joining my colleagues in working on that and demanding that of the administration. With that, I yield back.
Dr. Benishek of Michigan, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, frankly, I agree strongly with Mr. O'Rourke and Mr. Lewin, and you know, some of the answers I heard today, like from you, Ms. Counsel, you talked about we can't work together with the DoD until we actually get a system that works with the private sector as well. Well, the private sector is not going to be interoperable at any time in the near future that I can ever see, and to just link that together, it gives you another. Frankly, I agree that the President really needs to make this a priority to make this happen. I mean, I think I was at the hearing with the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the VA a while back, maybe this is 2011, where $1 billion has been spent and given up. And we just can't stand the fact that we're spending $1 billion on integrating healthcare, and then you tell us it can't be done. And I know that a lot of you are new, but you know, we get sick of this. And really, I want the President to be involved. But look, I want to go into something else here now that I heard about just today, and that is the Orlando Sentinel described a project of the VA as making a virtual hospital with 3D graphics in which veterans will create avatars and walk around examining their health care records, searching for medical information, and walking to a virtual medical advisor doing e-consult with physicians. Is anybody aware of this program? You, Ms. Counsel? I mean, to me, this is something, the DoD guys know anything about this? Apparently this is rejected by the DoD.
No, sir.
Well, it's just that it's kind of funny to see the VA doing some kind of a weird virtual hospital as a pilot program when we don't even have, we can't be working the real hospital. So you guys just aren't aware of that, and especially since the fact that most of the veterans have no idea what what an avatar and all that stuff is. Do you know how much? Is anyone aware of how much money that the VA has spent in trying to integrate this system? Mrs. Melvin, do you know? Or Ms. Counsel, you're new, so I don't expect much from you. But Ms. Melvin, do you know the amount of money? They told me over $1 billion.
We don't have a credible number. The most credible number we had was actually in the millions at $564 million for the couple of years of doing the integrated electronic health record. We have asked for figures to try to understand more specifically what that number is. I think I would say just over the history of the initiatives that we are looking at, to have it be above $1 billion would not be a surprise to me, but we don't have a
Let me ask another question. This is more like a philosophical question that I had a subcommittee hearing about in the VA this morning, and one of the things about IT in the public sector is that I see changes so fast that, there's a new iPhone every 6 months, so the IT stuff changes really fast, but it seems like the VA and the DoD, they take years and years and years to develop a change in their IT system, and they have to consider every possibility before they implement it, and that process takes 8 years, by which time the thing is obsolete. Does anybody, Ms. Counsel, you have some kind of a software background. Why can't we institute the kind of changes incrementally all the time, rather than have to build a system that takes 8 years to build, and then by the time it's implemented, it doesn't work?
I totally concur with you. I think that since my arrival 3.5 months ago into government, it's been an eye-opener of how long it takes to move technology. There are a number of different governance processes in place that don't hinder in private industry because our focus is on productivity and moving things forward in a very different, aggressive manner. What I will tell you we've done with our new strategy is to put a framework forward to push us to much more of an execution focus by having a now, near, and future time frame. I think we need to time box our work and think about what's really going to give us the most bang for our effort and get those things done and done quickly.
Well, that's what
I
I'm talking
agree
about.
with
We
you on
can't expect
technology.
to fix the comprehensive repair of the entire system. Let's just move along incrementally and do some changes, because it's Vista. I don't know if you've probably been on Vista. It's like a disaster. But it's like the best thing out there because nobody else has any interoperability at all. So I just encourage you, and I encourage the President to focus on making sure that you two guys get this all figured out. Thanks.
Retired Sergeant Major Waltz of Minnesota, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman and my colleagues. Thank each of you for being here. I just came from a roundtable with the 40 largest veteran service organizations. They understand how key this is. Any reform is going to hinge on this. I also say I understand your expertise that many of you have. I represent the Mayo Clinic, and so I have I would say at least a working knowledge now over the years of how electronic medical records are diagnostic tools and all the importance and the challenges you're up against. I also know my friend Dr. Rowe and I years ago traveled to Afghanistan to watch 5 different databases be opened as they were operating on someone, watch a MRI, or in that case I guess it was an X-ray, not have the bandwidth to move it from Afghanistan to tape it on their chest on the way to Landstuhl. So, I mean, we get this. We were looking at it. We were trying to piece it all together. And our goal was to follow that soldier back from that injury on the battlefield, from right at the aid station all the way back to the VA hospital in Tennessee or wherever in Minnesota, of what happened. So we've been on this. We were there and celebrated on April 9th, 2009, when the virtual lifetime record President Obama signed. And I say that to you not to grandstand, not to highlight Back to the Future Week or something like that. I say it to you because you're hearing it up here from members who've been down this road. And it's not for lack of commitment, it's not for lack of expertise, but something has got to break. And when I say, and you're probably right, Mr. Miller, and I look back at the NDAA on the issue of what deployment means. Spirit and letter of the law, the spirit is obviously we just want them to be able to access and make it work. And I get that we got to clarify and get its specifics. I guess I'm throwing it out there, and maybe it's more rhetorical than anything, because, again, I do not question your commitment. I think we got very bright people here. In all fairness, there were very bright people that sat there before you in these very same jobs. And I hear the deployment date we set, and you're telling us, again, not because you're not working hard or you're not trying or you don't want to get it, saying we're not going to get there. My question might be to all of you, is this, again, like my question you're asking, can we do this? I mean, I know it goes against the American spirit. I kind of feel like Churchill was right on this. You can always count on America to get it right after they try everything else first. Dang, we're trying a lot of stuff here. When do we get it right?
So, sir, I guess let me make a couple comments. One is, I think we get it right when our users are happy. And I would offer, I really do think if you were to sit down and talk to our users and they see what we've done, we've delivered 4 releases in 22 months jointly between the DoD and VA, focused on improving interoperability, getting feedback back, incorporating in. So I could show you, just like Apple does, just like Microsoft does, 4 releases, 22 months. That's actually a little faster than Apple rolls out their iPhone every year. So we have demonstrated that we can make this move faster. I think the bigger thing is we've all got to remember it's bigger than the IT, right? The IT is actually the easy part of what we're talking about here today. What we don't seem to ever want to tackle are the people stuff, the process stuff, all the things that make business systems really hard. And so I hear what GAO says, and I would like to believe a single system between DoD and VA would be able to be there tomorrow, but the reality is we got a lot of hard things that make joint programs in DoD incredibly hard. Adding another level with the VA makes it even more hard. And so I would just offer to everybody, we have to view this as an incremental progression. And I personally believe that what DoD and the VA are doing right now are getting both houses in order to position us in the future where we're actually ready to have the discussion about moving to a single system if there's actually a business case. I think what we tried to do back in 2010 was way ahead of the technology. It was way ahead of where our processes were. It was way ahead of where we are in data, and we fundamentally set ourselves up to fail. It's not because we didn't have people that believed. It's not because I couldn't show you a pretty technology slide that shows you all these cool whiz-bang things that are going to happen. We failed for non-technical reasons, and those things are things that we have to understand and we have to deal with. That's why I think you've seen more progress the last 2 years between the two departments, because we learned from that. And now we're focused on getting our collective houses in order and really addressing the interoperability thing. And just let me say, a single system does not guarantee interoperability. You can go talk to any major national healthcare provider, and they will tell you that they struggle when you're talking about regions or they're talking about working across large geographic areas. And it's not, again, because of the technology, it's because at the local level, they generate different processes, they do business differently. And so for us to think that just adopting a single system is going to solve all that, I think is a little naive. I actually believe we need to have the discussion about how do we actually get ourselves to a level of maturity and readiness so that when we want to make the smart business decision, because at the end of the day, this is all about the taxpayer and it's all about a beneficiary. And I think I can show you very clearly where using the power of competition and using technology the right way, and at least in the DoD, we've been able to drive this cost down and really save on the Department of Defense and make sure our users are getting what they need without, in any way, shape, or form, jeopardizing interoperability.
I appreciate that. My time is up. I appreciate your candidness. I think that is a question we're going to have to do. We're going to have to dig deep on this. And again, the taxpayers are going to ask for results. And I think you're on the right place there. I yield back. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. Mr. Hulskamp of Kansas, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some excellent questions. I appreciate the joint hearing on this. I want to follow up with Mr. Miller, if I might. You've indicated you thought there was no way possible to deploy and meet the interoperability requirements of NDAA. Is that the case?
Sir, what I've said is we will have an initial capability that's in line with the NDAA. What I've said is not possible, based on industry experience, based on all feedback from everybody we've engaged with, is to think that I can deploy to more than 1,200 locations within that short of...
No, I follow that. But you've been in this position for 2 years. Is that what you
Yes, sir.
told us
Yes,
2
sir.
years ago?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that what you told the VA 2 years ago? This was not possible?
The deployment date for 2016, sir?
Now, you've been in this position for 2 years. Now you're telling us that this was never, ever possible, if I understood correctly. And $564 million later, and we're now saying, well, this is really not possible.
The $564 million dealt with IEHR, which is a prior strategy. The 2014 NDA directed us to deploy a modernized electronic healthcare software supporting clinicians in the departments no later than 31 December 2016. What I have routinely said in my engagements on the Hill has been we will provide that software capability at our IOC sites in the Pacific Northwest, but it is not physically possible to touch over 1,200 locations around the globe to deploy that software and have a remote chance of being successful.
So do you have interoperability within DoD currently?
Yes, sir. So we're, as I mentioned earlier, the other
According
part...
to the NDA definition,
Yes, sir, I do. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll ask the VA. Do you have interoperability currently within the VA?
As I said earlier, we have at the fundamental level, we have the capability of sharing the data and with data standards. We are doing the use case analysis to look at more the semantic level at this point. So we have pieces of it at this point. To get full data...
I'm confused. Yes or no? I mean, do you have interoperability within the VA?
We have interoperability within the VA in terms of the data that we have. I don't want to get too technical on this. We are...
Well, I'm just asking for yes or no. I mean, as defined within the NDAA.
Within VA, we were able to bring the data together to share it across the areas.
So it's yes or no? We have interoperability today in the VA. I thought earlier you said we did not.
What I was saying was the interoperability, we were talking about DoD and VA. So within VA, yes.
There's 1,700 locations in the VA, and we got thousands of non-VA care locations.
Within VA,
I definitely know there's not interoperability between the VA and the non-VA care. Is that correct? My question is within the VA.
Within the VA, we have interoperability to share the data, yes.
Well, I wonder about that. Follow-up I have with the VA is, according to the VA, less than 8% of medical records are marked as sensitive based on the aggregate of all VISTA systems. In a briefing to the OIG, the subcommittee staff was informed that unless records are classified as sensitive, VA does not have the capability to track when those records have been accessed. So does this mean the VA has no visibility on who accesses over 92% of medical records at the VA?
I think if your question is related to who actually, that's called segmentation, who actually looks and logs, there is audit and logging into those systems. You know who goes into the system and who's looking at which records. Is it beyond that?
Well, no, this is different. This is different information than what I understood you told our subcommittee staff. You said unless the records are classified as sensitive, you do not know who accesses those records. Is that inaccurate? Is that a change? Or are you tracking each of those? This is pretty critical. I want to know who's really getting into these systems.
Yeah, I'm not aware of, I wasn't part of the testimony, sir. I don't know what you're referring to.
Mr. Burns, do you know what percentage of your records are, do you track the access of those records?
I'm not aware of that statistic, no.
Would you be willing to provide that to the committee? And
come back to you.
would you agree that if you do not know who accesses those records, that we have a problem with privacy of that particular data?
I would say yes. And today, what happens with our PII and PHI information, doctors log in, we follow who logs in, as well as the nurses, and they log into those records and out. But we will be happy to furnish you with the further information.
Okay, and I would, based on what we find out, if the 8% matches, again, we're seeing 92% is you don't track the access to those records. But follow-up would be later once we figure out what that number is. I want to know what the VA is doing to improve audit details in VISTA to ensure that the veteran's PI is not inappropriately accessed. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Yuleskamp. Mr. Connolly of Virginia, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to the panel. You know, this really is so much more important than record keeping or how we deploy technology. This is about how we treat our active duty military and our veterans. Is that not correct? Anyone disagree with that? Would you agree we haven't done so good? Mr. DeVries, you cited FTAR. We prefer to call it the Issa-Connolly bill, but FTAR is fine. And I think you cited it because it is a new tool that, had it been available, might have helped us in looking at the investments we made in the past. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that why you cited
it? So that the FTAR ruling has come out, and I think it has been
I'm sorry, what?
The FTAR rule has come out, and I think that's a great leveling set for the other agencies across the federal side of the House, providing the tools for the CIO to look at. It also reinforced a lot of the behaviors that we were exercising already inside the DoD. In the case of here for the medical records, I don't think we had enough authorities, we had enough oversight on it. I would challenge to the committee here, as we were talking about this discussion, we kept using the word systems. And FTAR in itself kind of deals about a system, but it's not. It's about understanding the data, it's about understanding the individual, both the patient, but also the provider for it. And I really don't care how the provider accesses or what tools he uses, as long as he takes care of me, the customer.
Right.
And I think that's where we're going to.
I would just note for the record, had FTAR been in law at the time, it would have required a cost-risk analysis to substantiate whether the current approach is in fact less expensive and faster to implement, as the departments have asserted, before the 2013 change was made to pull the plug. And GAO, of course, has repeatedly asked for data to substantiate that decision. So it would have been an analytic tool to help us through. Ms. Counsel, you're familiar with FTAR?
Yes, sir.
And you're moving to implement it in the VA?
We're fully implemented within the VA.
Good. Do you think it could have been a useful tool? I know you're only there 3.5 months, but that gives you the one benefit of looking back and thinking, how could we have avoided some of the problem?
It's always great to have solid data and understand how decisions were made so you can decide and people understand at that point in time, this is what we knew and this is the decision that we made.
Mr. Miller, I wish I had lots of time to
talk to you. You said we failed for non-technical reasons. What did you mean?
Sir, what I mean is with business systems, you're really changing how the work is done, right? So you got to think about the training, you got to think about change management, you got to think about communications. You know, the reality is that these tools on the business side exist to enable workflows and to make decisions. And my comment really is that oftentimes where we fail is that we haven't done that. We account for the user adoption. We don't account for the over-the-shoulder training. We don't account for all those things that have to happen to really make sure that the system is successful.
You know, and I think that's a fair point. It's not just about technology, and technology is a tool, not an end in and of itself, but it's important. I've gone to oncology centers where doctors initially really resisted electronic record keeping, and now they wouldn't live without it because they can now see instantly the protocols in place for dozens of patients and make instant modifications up or down that may be more efficacious. It's saving lives. What we're about here today is saving lives. It is vital that if I'm active duty and you've got my medical records, they be seamlessly transferred to VA when I become a veteran, so that we're not worried about whether I need to reinvent the wheel on testing and data, but that we're getting to my medical condition and treating it. And that is what concerns me, that by pulling the plug on an integrated system in 2013 and deciding to reinvest in our two parallel systems that are not interoperable, how do we get to the point where it's interoperable? Maybe you perfect the two parallel systems, but when I cease being active duty, I have to go into a brand new system and start all over again.
Sir, it's important to remember that requirement is not unique to DoD and VA. I'm a Marine. I took my medical record home, but just as importantly, I'm a cancer survivor. I had cancer as a civilian. When I moved from San Diego to Charleston, my provider in Charleston told me to call back to Kaiser Permanente, who had an electronic system, and have them fax it to me. I understand the importance of taking care of our veterans.
And did that work?
No, sir, it did not. So I think it's important we recognize this is a national issue. How we take care of people, how we provide health care, how people move around between our systems is something that the national community has to figure out, and they are attacking this issue. It has been very clear, if you watched during the procurement that we went through this past year, how much the debate ensued on interoperability and how much progress you got out of some of our national
Mr. Miller, it is a national issue. But we're talking about two federal agencies that deal with a specific population in our care. And when we talk about taxpayers, they want to know our military, our veterans are getting the best we can possibly deliver, and we're not delivering the best. And one of the problems is we've had bureaucratic inertia between two agencies that can't get their acts together on behalf of the men and women we're serving. That's the issue. Not that there's some national problem that's bigger than all of this. This is conquerable. This is within our purview. You're federal agencies. And you owe more to the men and women who serve this country than they're getting. And that's why we're having this hearing. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Dr. Rowe from Tennessee, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm going to probably go down a little different road. You know, I was here probably other than Mr. Walsh. I've been here on the Veterans Affairs Committee longer than anyone. Served in the U.S. Army as a physician, as a doctor. Trained in a VA. So I've been in both systems. I was in the system when this was your health record and you carried it back with you. And it worked okay. And this electronic system that we've got in the VA now works so smoothly is that the primary care doctors can see about 10 or 12 people a day. And me using this technology, I could see 25 people a day easily. Now we have transitioned to a more modern system. There's no question. And Mr. Miller, you are 100% right. I went from paper to an electronic health record. It is not easy. What you're trying to do is not easy. But I agree with Mr. Connolly, ditto, right on. What has got to happen is we've got to have one system where 20 years from now, we're going to be sitting here having exactly the same conversation. And very smart people 5 years ago sat down and told us we can make these interoperable. I went to Great Lakes, Illinois in January. That wasn't a lot of fun to see how interoperable the system was at the VA and the Navy. And guess what? in about 5 minutes, they could give me, the doctor, a CBC. Well, I hadn't got 5 minutes to wait. I can wait on a fax machine that quick to be able to pull it up. And let me tell you what $1 billion is that was wasted. And to this day, I asked the Secretary, what happened to that $1 billion when you two were trying to work together, to, not you all, but the previous DoD and VA, to make this work? I serve in a hospital system in Johnson City, Tennessee, that's a $1 billion system. It has 9,000 employees, 13 hospitals, 70,000 admissions, 250,000 ER visits, and they service a $600 million debt. That's what $1 billion can do. And that's what the VA and DoD managed to waste, and I have no idea where it even is. It's hard for me with a straight face to go home and say what we did with this money. Now, I appreciate the fact that like the VA has a legacy, you guys at DoD had a legacy system. I think you were smart to get rid of it and go to something more modern. That does make sense. But what should have happened in that time was your partner, which are taking care of exactly the same patients. One day I was an active duty military, the next day I was a veteran. It happened to you, it happened to me, it's going to happen eventually to everybody after their 30 is in. So I think that the President should step up and say, we're going to put these two department heads together, and they're going to work on one system. It may take 5 or 6 years to implement this system. But me personally, I'm not going to be part of another system that 10 years from now we have the same thing where you can't even pull up a CBC when you separate from the military. So, Ms. Counsel, you have a legacy system you're trying to make work. And I'm not asking you to say it's up to you to switch systems. That's above your pay grade. But wouldn't you think it would be simple if both of you had the same system?
Life is always easier when we're looking at the same map.
That's what I thought. And the data, and I understand being able to format data where you can see it. I've got that. I know how that works. In our own ACO at home, we have 40 different electronic health systems. I got it. I understand that. That's why if you can get to one, everybody benefits. And I think if we're going to spend billions of dollars, we ought to go deep in and convert both systems. And the VA is comfortable. The DoD was comfortable with what they had, but they couldn't work together. And look, smart people tried. I don't think there was any fraud or anything. I think a lot of smart people tried to make this thing work and just couldn't. And Ms. Melvin, you said that. No single system, no identifiable goals, and I think that pretty much spelled it out.
I would agree with you. Our concern throughout the history of this initiative is that there's never been a really defined end state for what it was that the agencies were trying to achieve and how they could go about really determining what interoperability is and then establishing and identifying how they were going to get there.
That's what we asked the secretaries to do. In 2013, I was at the hearing when both secretaries came in and gave us that information that it wouldn't work, so they just stopped. And then that's when the DoD went a separate route. And again, I have no problem with that, and I think it's probably a good idea. And Mr. Miller, you said that that this was hard. Well, you know, hard isn't an excuse not to do this, and it's something that I think we have to do going forward for our veterans and for our active duty people. And the fact that a private system will work. I mean, you sort of made the system that it wouldn't work at the VA. Well, if it works in a submarine, it works in the private sector. And as Mr. Wald said, we've been to Afghanistan and looked at that wounded warrior there. It will work at a VA, I would think, with perhaps some modifications.
Sir, I'm not going to disagree with you. Sir, I'm not going to disagree with you. I think what we also have to recognize is the two departments have a culture of how they go about doing acquisition. In the case of the Department of Defense, I think what we've recognized over the past 5 years has really been we're not in the health IT development business, really. We want to be somebody that leverages the commercial market. We want to be somebody that's kind of rides that. I mean, when I was a Marine, we had Banyan Vines. It no longer exists. We now use Microsoft products. I think what has to happen here is I think we have to attack the problem the same way. And the reason why I say it's about bigger than a technology is when the two organizations budget differently, they do acquisition differently, they view their role in health IT differently, it sounds really...
But to interrupt you, though, the whole purpose has been stated 1,000 times up here. The mission is to take care of both the wounded warrior when they're on active duty and then the veteran. Nobody cares about all this stuff. What they care about is, do I get the care for me and my family? That's what they care about.
Yes, sir, I completely agree. I just think as an acquisition person, I can solve that problem more cost-effectively for the American taxpayer by solving interoperability while letting the two departments go through the necessary modernization that needs to happen. The reality, sir, like you recognize, DoD stopped their last deployment of a system in 2006. My niece's husband is an Air Force doctor down in Biloxi, Mississippi. He calls me routinely to talk about how bad his system is because he went through residency using commercial systems. He cannot believe the impact on his productivity by not having a system that's as modern and advanced as what he needs. So the reason I say that is because we can solve the interoperability challenge. What I can't afford to do is go back to my clinical users who have demanded a new system and tell them I got 5 more years while we work through all these other hard things. So I just think we need to come back for the record and show you what the business case looks like.
I'm over my time, Mr. Chairman. One last thing is that I've been hearing for 7 years, we're going to make this work, and interoperable by smart people. Hadn't worked yet. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. Ms. Duckworth of Illinois, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm thanking the witnesses for being here today. When I left Walter Reed as a patient, I left with a CD-ROM with my entire records, including the notes from the surgeons who performed my amputations. In order to get into the VA system, I had to wait 90 days for an appointment, and that consisted of me going in to see a physician's assistant for whom I had to disrobe to show him that I was still an amputee, that in those 90 days, my limbs had not grown back. Now, in that time period, that physician's assistant did not want to see me. He had other patients to see. There was a backlog of patients waiting to be seen. He was not able to just accept DoD's records. And so it was a waste of time for him, it was a waste of time for me, it was a waste of resources for other veterans. I say this because as a patient of the VA and as a former patient of DoD, I am proud of both healthcare systems and I am proud of the people who work in both systems. But I am also equally frustrated by both sides because I have been a member of the leadership at VA. In fact, my frustration with this very issue is one of the reasons that I quit VA in 2011 to go run for Congress. Because of the posturing, the inability to work with each other, and the continued strife and the waste of sheer taxpayer dollars. It's literally one of the reasons why I ran for office, because I sat in those meetings every week at the Pentagon where, let me tell you, from my personal opinion, Tammy Duckworth's personal opinion, the VA got rolled by the DoD on a weekly basis. Mr. Miller, what you can tell your folks about, your clinicians about what you can do to get them a good system is not wait 5 years. You can tell them we're going to adopt VISTA, and then together, while we're using VISTA, we can work towards something else. That's how you get them a better system immediately. But let me tell you that I was there week after week, and then when it went on to months, there would be a new 1-star or a new 2-star who would rotate in, the old one would leave, and the new one would come and goes, oh, I need a new study, because I wasn't here for all of those weekly meetings. I need a new study. We need to figure out what's going on. Ms. Counsel, I know that you testified earlier, I was watching from my office, that you have to actually send the data from one VA hospital to another in order to be able to see that. I have to tell you that you've undersold VA a little bit, because I've gone to different VA facilities and actually have had my doctors know how to log out of the system for that hospital and then log into the correct system and been able to see my records, which has been very helpful. And following Hurricane Katrina, veterans who were affected by Hurricane Katrina could actually go to other VA facilities and get the prescriptions they needed wherever they were, whether that was in Texas or Missouri or Mississippi, wherever they ended up, they were able to get. So there's a way for that to happen. But look, this is about a longstanding, deeply embedded culture that prioritizes in both agencies turf battles over the well-being of our service members. It's about a VA system that struggles with the growing demand for the department's medical services, that is burdened by policies and written rules that says you have to go in to see a physician's assistant before he can confirm that your legs didn't grow back. I'm not a gecko, but they don't grow back on their own. It's also about the fact that we're wasting hours and resources to conduct medical examinations. We should be treating veterans. It's really been disheartening for me personally to watch the massive DoD bureaucracy repeatedly, and I say this again, repeatedly roll VA over and over and over again, which despite its serious problems with VA has real problems. It was actually one of the earliest organizations to implement EMRs. I just finished my PhD in October, and the topic of my PhD was actually electronic health records. And it was partially inspired because of my work on this issue. It was even more shocking to watch DoD not only roll VA, but roll the Office of Management and Budget, which pushed in vain early in the administration to convince DoD that it needed to work with VA to develop a single integrated electronic health record system. And to this day, I harbor serious concerns about the decision to abandon a goal of a unified, single integrated system for DoD and VA. If we're going to spend $11 billion of taxpayer money, I don't understand why we wouldn't have invested this astronomical amount of money in a fully functional, interoperable system. Now, having served on this committee and the Armed Services Committee, I have my suspicions about the motivations and incentives that explain DoD's longstanding unwillingness to work with VA to modernize and enhance VISTA to meet 21st century healthcare needs. And I'm not going to get in an argument with you. My personal opinion is everybody's got bureaucratic turf battles. Everybody's got a budget that you would like to hang on to and to supervise. And that stuff has got to end because veterans are suffering. So my question is actually to Ms. Melvin. In your testimony, you noted that neither DoD nor VA could substantiate their claims that maintaining two separate EHR systems would be less expensive than developing a single integrated system and would be developed faster than creating a new unified DoD-VA system. So they're not able to substantiate it.
They were not able to provide us the information. We asked that they provide or develop cost analyses for, cost estimates for the alternatives. The alternative to develop a single system as well as the new two separate systems, and to compare them and to provide information to us relative to which was the more viable solution. We'd like to see the justification for why going back to two systems is better than one system. That's very important to really the bottom line of whether this is a more reliable approach that they're taking over what they had been going with before.
Are you expecting that information anytime soon?
I don't believe we are. I don't think that we have any date yet to get that information. We are still working with them. We do still have our recommendations on record related to that, so we are still coordinating with the agencies about that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm well over time. I apologize. But may I request that the two agencies provide that information to this committee?
We have provided that information.
If there are no objections, with unanimous consent, please submit the information that Ms. Duckworth has requested for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Hurd of Texas.
Dr. Duckworth, I like the sound of that. We may have to have you as a witness on the follow-up hearing. I like going at the end of the first round of questioning because you get to hear all the conversations, and this is an interesting topic to me. My dear old father is still upset with me for not taking a job with IBM to help them build databases. So this is something, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I talked about my opening frustration, and that frustration is still here despite all the testimony. And my first question, Ms. Melvin, you've alluded to this and you've answered that, but I'm going to ask this question again. Who is in charge of interoperability of electronic health records between DoD and the VA?
At this time, the Interagency Program Office is designated as the single point of accountability. However, what we do know at this point and what we've reported is that VA has its own governing body, I think as Ms. Council has alluded to, and also DoD has its own governing body. So there actually are at least 3 different entities that are involved with this.
Thank you. That's helpful. Mr. Miller, you represent the IPO, is that correct?
Sir, I represent the Department of Defense as a senior executive responsible for both our interoperability and our modernization efforts. The director of the IPO is Dr. Lauren Thompson, who reported back in May, and she actually runs that office.
So is that Dr. Thompson? Right?
Yes, sir. So she reports both.
Do you report to her?
No, sir. She works for me and under Secretary Kendall.
So you're her boss?
Yes, sir.
So, but you're a DoD employee?
That's correct, sir.
So who is this governing body within DoD that is looking about this the interoperable medical health record?
So within both departments, they have their own IT acquisition organization. So within the Department of Defense, that's under Secretary Kendall. He's responsible for all of our acquisition. And so on the acquisition and technology side, he is who we report to on our efforts with interoperability. The same goes on the VA with Ms. Council. What we do is we routinely meet between Ms. Council and Secretary Kendall to review our progress.
So my question, Mr. DeVries, a clinic, a VA clinic, and let's just say San Antonio, can they have one computer that has access to the VA health system and the DoD health system?
They could, sir.
Do many people have access to that?
Not today.
Trick question.
Not today.
Okay. Why is that?
I think it's based upon technology, where we are today, and where the data is. Identity is the critical part here, as I talked about before, from both the patient as well as the provider.
Right.
You
And you're
authenticate
responsible for that, correct? Providing the accesses and the protections around that data, you specifically?
Correct. Overall policy is, yes.
So if Mr. Miller, can Mr. Miller tell you what to do? Is he in your chain of command?
He is not in our chain of command.
So the person that's responsible for protecting the data, right, of our health data, right, which is a key part of interoperability, the person who's charged with interoperability does not have control over those people making those decisions. Is that correct, or am I confused?
Sir, I would offer there's checks and balances. So my job within the Department of Defense is to lead the acquisition, the testing, and deployment, but I have to get approval from our CIO organization to make sure it meets security requirement. We're protecting data. So it's a partnership. There's no single, if you will, up to you up to the very senior level, but day to day, I can't do anything without him, and obviously they have to have something that we provide in order to assess our security and how we're doing at protecting people's information, sir.
So, Mr. Miller, you said this is a national issue about interoperability of healthcare records. I agree with you, and I also agree with Mr. Conley as well. This is about 2 federal agencies sharing information amongst each other. And to me, it's shocking that a doctor in San Antonio, Texas, can't have one computer on their desk that accesses both the DoD records and the VA records.
Sir, he can, and I would love to take.
But they're not. Look, so how many doctors, how many DoD doctors and how many VA doctors have y'all talked to on the implementation of this system and what they need in a interoperable electronic health record?
So let me talk about the requirements when we do interoperability. It is jointly led by easily 20 or more clinical leaders from both departments. And so today in San Antonio on the DoD side, we provide access through what we call JLV, but it's actually integrated in EHR.
And let's get to JLV.
So, sir, sir, let me just explain. It's in our EHR. It's inside of Alta. There is access to be able to see the VA data and the data from the private sector. That is available to any DoD physician, PA, nurse.
How do they gain access to it?
All they
Who do they ask? If I'm a doctor, How do I gain access to be able to see those both records?
So to be able to see both records, all they have to do is go, just like any other IT system, they go to the local administrator, they grant them the keys to access the system. We've gone in the DoD from about less than 500 now over 8,000 in about 6 months, and we are continuing to roll out.
And this is for JLV?
Yes, sir. In fact, at Brooke Army Medical, it is one of our largest users and actually where we've been doing the operational test. So besides getting input back on the requirement side, we've actually gone and done operational testing at Brooke Army Medical in Alaska and at Walter Reed to get feedback from no-kidding users, which has then been rolled into the future enhancements of the system. So we have an incredible engagement with our clinical functional users to make sure we're meeting their requirements.
But a soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine, when they show up to a VA clinic for the first time, they still have to print out.
No, sir. I talk to people routinely.
So let me ask you, so you're saying nobody has to do that?
So, sir, they print that record out because oftentimes our active duty, especially when they have been in the service a long time, predate our IT system. So I think it's important to recognize that we have not been fully electronic within the entire Department of
Look,
Defense.
absolutely. So here's the problem. You have, so quick question, and Mr. DeVries, you may be able to answer this question for me. If I'm in the Air Force and I go see a DoD doctor, is my record different than someone in the Army that goes and sees a DoD doctor?
It is not.
It is not?
It is not.
Same system.
Same system.
So all branches, of the, is it, okay, Air Force, Army, is it the same for all branches of the military?
Yes, sir, same system.
It writes to the same data repository.
Will the gentleman yield very
Yes,
briefly? I
please.
just have a little something.
Please.
So I don't know if the gentleman is aware of how frustrating this is when there's even a hospital in Chicago called, that is a joint federal VA DoD facility. And in that hospital, they actually have two computers sitting next to each other, one with the VA system and one with the DoD system. And that hospital is supposed to be a joint facility treating simultaneously veterans and Navy personnel. And even there in the Hallmark hospital that is the flagship of this effort, it's two computers sitting next to each other. Shameful.
It really is. So, you know, who's actually, so I look at this problem multiple ways. You have the various health facilities that a soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine may see in their time when they're in DoD. Then you have all the facilities within the VA. Then you have if a veteran has to go to a private a private healthcare provider. It's a whole nother set of issues with interoperability, which I recognize the complication of that. Then you have people that starting today, brand new, starting basic training in these new systems and their lifetime. Then you have the people that have already been serving, that have served for 30, 40 years, and they have a number of old records and are in legacy systems that are super old and outdated. I get that. But what we haven't heard from any of this is what is the plan to solve those different problems sets? Right? And we talk about mapping data. Do we not know what the format the various pieces of data are in? Do we not know? They're all basically databases, and we know how many fields they are. There may be thousands of different fields, and each field may hold it could hold text, it could hold imagery. You know, I get the difficulty of that, but we should already know what that mapping scheme is. And in order to do the map from DoD to the map to the VA system, why has it taken 4 years and $536 million to do that? And then everybody throws up their hands and says, "Our bad. This is really hard to do, and we're going to have to go through separate systems." Now, I recognize, I don't think anybody on this panel were around in 2008. Mr. DeVries, maybe you were. No? Oh, good. Not around, but you weren't involved in this. So first step is, have we gone back and looked at the problems as this was solved, right? And Ms. Counsel, I know you're new, and I'm excited about you bringing some expertise and experience from the private sector. I don't know if you knew what you were stepping into when you took this job, but we're glad you stood up and willing to take on this challenge. But we have to look at the failures in the past, and I'm sorry, 2 years is not acceptable. And saying that, you know, I wasn't around when we're talking about the FY14 NDAA, and that we're going to comply with that requirement. But at the end of this month, our soldiers are not going to be able to walk into a VA system and get access to their DoD record. They may be able to see it in JLV, but JLV is the equivalent of using microfiche. And you may be able to search for an individual patient, but you can't search what was their blood pressure. And sometimes you having to have VA clinics do the same test over because they can't see the imagery that was included in their DoD system. That's a huge waste of time. And what's shocking in all this, the men and women, the doctors, the healthcare providers in the VA and the DoD, they're doing a damn good job, right? When they're actually providing that service, and they're the ones that are having to get these workarounds for their system to make sure that they're providing the kind of health care that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine have. Now, my last question, I'm way over time, and I apologize. Ms. Counsel, do you have all the tools, authorities, in order to do this job?
I've had this conversation with my team. I think it's the first time in my career I can say yes.
Well, excellent. If you need more, let us know.
Will do.
And with that, I yield back.
Ms. Kelly, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. GAO's written testimony concludes that your decisions to pursue separate EHR efforts highlights, and I quote, the criticality of these departments needing to define what they aim to accomplish through these efforts and identify meaningful outcome-oriented goals and metrics. DoD and VA, do you agree with GAO's assessment that outcome-oriented goals would help measure progress toward interoperability and hold your departments accountable for their progress?
Yes, I do.
Yes, we do.
So what do your respective agencies aim to achieve from your interoperability efforts? What do you want for your outcomes?
From our point of view, we want to be able to have a medical and electronic health record that is accurate for that veteran, that can be used in any way, shape, or form that that veteran needs to have it used, and be fully portable to be where the veteran needs to be.
Ma'am, I would say it kind of goes around what we use in the DoD, a quadruple aim, if you will, and those four vectors really are, first is readiness. At the end of the day, the Department of Defense has to be operationally ready to execute the mission, and that includes both our service members as well as our families who take care of them while they're on deployment. Secondly, we got to address quality, we got to look at our cost, and we got to look at improving decisions that actually impact the lives of our service members, beneficiaries, and veterans.
Okay. And what value and benefits will all users gain from the deployment of modernized electronic health record systems with interoperability? What do you?
At the end of the day, it's a seamless, unified point of view, and I think that's what every patient wants. They want not to have to answer the question 10 times, not to have to fill out another form, not to have a missed record or a missed report or a missed test. They really want the doctor to have the best information at their hands at the time that they need to make the decisions about their health.
And I would take it a couple ways. One is I think our users really want a modern system that helps with decision-making, gives them productivity time back, looks at engaging modern technologies like smartphones and some of the natural language processing, because at the end of the day, they're busy, and we ought to be doing everything we can to provide them tools that are open and secure to enable them. The second thing I would highlight is we want to go after a modern system that is really about the patient, and it's really about engaging the patient more. We have the ability today to provide our health record information to our beneficiaries, but I think when you see what's going on in the commercial market, you really see where the more the patient is engaged in their healthcare decisions, the better the outcomes. So one of the things we are really after here is making sure that we have a system that engages them, and so it really can help drive. And lastly, I would say, from our perspective on the IT side, it's also about security, and it's about driving down sustainment costs. The system we have today, actually it's multiple systems, we cannot sustain them forever. We have to adopt an enterprise system that handles a lot of that integration and continues to provide us new technology so that we can drive our sustainment cost out so we can be affordable.
Both of you had great answers, so my last question, what's the status in defining these outcome-oriented goals? You had the right answers, but what's the status?
As far as we're concerned, our goals and our new dashboard will be up in January for full visibility. We're looking to make sure we're measuring the right things and we're measuring metrics that matter, not just a bunch of stuff that nobody really cares about.
Ma'am, the IPO is actually taking the lead here. They actually have had a series of summits and meetings, pulling together subject matter experts and people to kind of start working our way through this. In fact, tomorrow is one of those meetings. In the case of, at the larger DoD side, just like the VA, we have a larger performance metrics and things that we monitor. What we're working through right now is trying to understand, is that the right map or are there things we're missing, right? So what we're really trying to do is generate a first step that reutilizes those, and in parallel, what I've also asked that we look at is bringing in some really smart people who understands operations research. So we have some great FFRDCs and activities that really understand how to look at some of these things, as well as some of the national health systems. And so while we're kind of doing this first effort, we're also going to be doing a very strategic look and engaging some people and having them help us work our way through this. We aren't the first people that have tried to figure some of this out, but we recognize that it's important, and we recognize we got to get something in place that's better than just measuring transactions between our two departments.
Well, Mr. Chairman, or both of you, I look forward to having another hearing so we can hold these departments accountable and see what the progress is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Dr. Benishek, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Counsel, I know that you're new there, and I have a couple of specific questions. Has anyone reported to you that the Choice Card program participants, the database that's maintained in the Health Eligibility Center, is running out of space, and at some point this issue will cause it to crash? Have you heard anything about that?
I have not.
Has anyone revealed to you that the Choice Card database apparently didn't go through the normal security review process?
I'm not aware of that.
This Health Eligibility Center is in Atlanta. Do you think you could kind of look into these issues that have come up to the committee, and if you could go there and see if is this a reality or what?
As far as the HEC is concerned, related to the other issues, but I'm not as sure of the choice issues that you mentioned, but we certainly will.
Yeah, well, I'm just bringing this up because it's on, the committee has had these issues, and as long as you're before me here, it sort of relates to the security question, because, I'm on this O&I subcommittee at VA, and, we've been reported to that the VA health system has been, hacked completely. I'd like to be sure that this does not continue to be the case. I mean, and I saw Mr. Miller's, we've been worried about that with the DoD, and we certainly want to have a system that gets hacked.
No one wants to get a system get hacked. I'm not aware of our systems being hacked, sir.
Well, I don't know.
I would love to look at that
information
and certainly understand it better, and we move with fast diligence and quickly on this issue. And if you, as you're aware, with the cyber strategy we put in place, we've tightened up our processes aggressively, reduced the elevated privileges that people have had in our environments, and changed it aggressively. And in particular with the HEC, as it related to the systems and the applications that we're engaged in with the veterans, we have remediated that system, which was not an OINT system, but it is now. But the choice program, I will certainly look into that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Benishek. Ms. Duckworth, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was earlier, Mr. Miller, I think you mentioned that VA and DoD have very different acquisition systems, but I believe that under the previous CIO at VA, he instituted a program called PMAS, a Project Management Acquisition System, that, as I recall, was very well received and have saved significant amounts of money for the taxpayers in terms of how the VA acquires IT systems and programs. Ms. Counsel, is VA still using PMAS or something similar, or legacy from that?
Yes, PMAS is not our acquisition system as much as it is a management system of how programs and how programming is done to create code. We are in the process of relooking and reestablishing PMAS to reduce the overhead that it started to create in order to make sure that we can get code done faster with higher quality and the security and different techniques we need built in. So it will be a more holistic look at everything we do from end to end. It's a solid process, but just like every other process, you need to look at it and constantly keep it up to date.
Right. So is it something that would be used if you were to, as you're working towards improving the electronic medical record system, something that would be used with perhaps work towards interoperability?
Our PMS system is primarily used to develop software and to follow the gates and process to ensure that we have all the process in place to develop software or to purchase software and to deploy it. So it is our management process for how we get things done.
Thank you. Ms. Melvin, can you explain to me in more detail the GAO's concerns with the decision by DoD and VA to keep operating two separate EHR systems rather than establish a single integrated system?
Our concern is just the inherent duplication that comes with having two paths to developing systems that are serving a large body of a population that's very similar. Also, there are a large number of functions that are, for inpatient requirements, that are the same. Prior report showed 97% of those requirements being the same. So from that, for inpatient, I should say. And our concern is from the standpoint of not having a common, whether the agencies will have a common goal that they work toward, whether in fact when they ultimately have this system and they've gone down to these two separate paths, whether they in fact do end up with systems that have the interoperable capability between them that will allow them to serve patients in the way that we've talked about today and ultimately to improve the healthcare mission. So it's about the cost of having duplicative systems. It's about the overall management relative to your ability to deliver on those capabilities and serve a common mission for the service members.
So 97%.
This was a study that was previously done in terms of, that showed 97% or over 97% of their inpatient functional requirements were common across the two departments. So that's a factor that goes into our concern that the agencies do need to look more closely at what their capability is to put in place a system that's common for both departments.
Is it a true statement that VA operates the largest hospital network in the nation?
The VA and DoD have two of the largest healthcare networks in the nation, yes.
How big are they in relative size, the size of VA's network compared to the DoD's size?
I believe that DoD's system is slightly larger. I don't want to misspeak on that, but I believe their healthcare system is larger than
Is it larger in terms of number of patients served, or is it larger in terms of more facilities?
I will defer. I'll defer
Ms.
to
Counsel?
actually them.
Ms. Counsel, you look like you have an answer.
The DoD is larger in terms of different outlets and facilities. We are larger in terms of the number of patients we see.
Do you know how many patients you serve?
The last time I saw the number was 10 million, approximately in the DoD, 24 million in the VA.
All right, so you have more than twice as many patients accessing your healthcare system than DoD does.
That information, if I'm recalling it properly, yes.
Okay. Ms. Melvin, can you explain how this decision for them to keep two different systems instead of a single integrated system is going to affect interoperability well into the future?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's one of our concerns is that the departments haven't provided a clear justification for why two systems is better than one. That's the critical information that is needed to really justify moving toward the two systems. Again, the history of this has been that, you know, they've been down the path of two systems for many, many years. The single joint system, as we understood it, was intended to take care of some of the challenges that the two departments had in their prior efforts to develop interoperable capabilities between two systems. So having a justification for why moving back to that, besides the obvious factors of cost and schedule that they've mentioned, are important to know.
Well, maybe you'll get an answer to that question since you've not been able to get that information as a GAO, but maybe with the Congress asking for it, they will finally provide it. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Hurd, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Ms. Melvin, would you be able to get us a list of the individuals by name in DoD and VA, including subcontractors, contractors that worked on the interoperability project between 2008 and 2013?
We will look into the information that we have and provide you with.
And I'm curious as the number of people that worked on that project, on the interoperability project, from 2008 to 2013 that are still employed at both organizations, and which contractors we're still using from that period when we spent over $500 million and decided that instead of joining everything, we're going to split it up.
Chairman Hurd, that is not information that I know that we have in our records specifically at this point, but we'd be glad to work with your staff to
Great.
to get that information.
Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Miller, what are your next 2 milestones for achieving interoperability?
Sir, on the interoperability front, actually just last night we provided an update on our data maps, and so our next milestones are basically to continue to evolve those. Our next delivery on the maps, because we're now entering a maintenance phase and getting feedback, will be in the December timeframe, and then we're also in the process of doing our next software delivery, which will be early next calendar year, and that software delivery is basically, again, taking feedback. There's areas that our functional users have requested, and we're going to be working that software release in the January timeframe.
Great, thank you. Ms. Council? Or Mr. Burns?
Excuse me, yes, a couple of different fronts. One is on the data mapping, we have a quarterly update that we do. So the next one is coming up in November to give us the next set of the, as I mentioned earlier, the 25 domains. And then we update each one of the respective domains going forward. That's just on data mapping, and that's part of interoperability. In addition to it, we are testing and rolling out EHMP, otherwise known as the Electronic Health Management Platform. That is, in its current form, is we call version 1.2, and that is a read-only version right now. It's been it's in delivery at 2 sites, and we're going to continue to roll that out.
It's in delivery, so they're the beta testers?
Yeah, we were testing it.
What are those sites?
Hampton, and the other one, off the top of my head, I don't recall, but I'll get you the name of the other one. And then we are then going to the next phase, which is EHMP 1.3 in the January time frame to start the what we call IOC, initial operation testing of that. That will give us the first capability of doing order and report write capability beyond the read capability we have today. And by the way, that also has a very good search capability to look up information, contextual and content capabilities. So those are 2 key things to moving us in the interoperability direction to move out. And our goal is to have 1.3 out by the end of the year so that we can meet the December 31st, 2016.
Thank you, Mr. Burns and Ms. Council and Mr. DeVries. I'm looking forward to having further conversations with y'all about the implementation of FITARA and ensuring that y'all have all the tools you need in order to bring our IT infrastructure into the 21st century. Thank you all for being here. I yield back, Chairman.
All right, thanks to the panel. You are now excused. Today we have had a chance to hear about problems that exist with multiple efforts between affairs to make their health records either integrated or interoperable. This hearing was necessary to identify the continued failures that have allowed these efforts to remain ongoing after decades of attempts to join these two health records that cover patients of the largest healthcare systems in this nation. As I mentioned in my opening statement, VA has expended billions of dollars in an attempt to improve its electronic health record system and make it interoperable with that of the DoD. Yet GAO has found that these agencies' health records would not be fully interoperable until at least 2018. Unfortunately, based on VA's track record regarding its information security failures and the numerous attempts made to join these 2 agencies' records, I am not even convinced that it is a feasible completion date. I am encouraged, however, by the recent personnel changes that have occurred within VA's Office of Information and Technology, but there is still much work to be done. I believe Laverne Council has a sound plan and strives to fix VA's OIT, But the question is, how long will it take? I am angered by the fact that VA and DoD poorly structured and continue to misuse the IPO. It is no longer a quote-unquote single focal point mandated by Congress. It has become as divergent as the VA and DoD, and through it, both departments have grossly misused money appropriated by Congress. As such, I am exploring ways to correct these problems once and for all, since VA and DoD have continued to disregard Congress on this matter. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. With that, without objection, so ordered. I would like to once again thank all of our witnesses and audience members for joining us in today's conversation, and I would like to thank Chairman Hurd for holding this joint hearing on these very important issues. With that, this hearing is adjourned.